for the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication, Councilor Green, and I'm joined by Councilors Driscoll, Councilor Hogan, Councilor Allen, Councilor Paniagua. I think that's it at the moment. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you to present your budget.
All right, good morning. Leah Whitmer, I'm the Director and Chief Administrative Law Judge of the BAA. I'll just start with giving you a departmental overview. We have right now 2 full-time employees, myself and a paralegal, and 3 part-time administrative law judges that form our appeals panel. And right now we have 2 City Rise interns that are funded through the City Rise grant through the New York State Attorney General's office. In this budget, I'm asking for an additional paralegal, which most of us have discussed before. Based on the capacity of tickets being issued, it's just really imperative that we have that additional staffing to be able to handle that volume. And we can go through the specific numbers in a moment. Also asking to reinstate the part-time administrative law judge that I cut due to the COVID contingency budget. That administrative law judge will be able to help me do the hearings, which again, due to the capacity at this point, it's becoming unsustainable to do by myself. I'm the only one that can hear the underlying hearings. I'm the only one that can sign default decision and orders. When we get to the point, I'll be the only one that can sign judgments. So having another person, even on a part-time basis, will just be immensely helpful for that. And then finally, the budget also includes a small raise for myself that will be, similar to the equity adjustments Kristen was talking about in law, just to make the position competitive within the law department, somewhat competitive compared to state administrative law judges. And then in the addition we can talk more when we get to the PVB budget hearing next, but taking over the adjudication side of parking. So that's an overview of the department. We touched base on some of the numbers at the committee meeting in February, and I'm happy to report that they continue to increase, which is, why our volume's increasing and why we need these additional positions. So right now, actually, we've surpassed most of the 2020, 2021 estimates that you see on the activity indicators. When I compiled those, we were kind of coming off the midst of a standstill due to COVID. As I've mentioned before, similar to codes being able to go inspect houses, we temporarily paused ticketing and hearings from March through June of last year. We recommenced both of those things in July. And since then, the ticketing volume has just continued to increase. So to give you an idea of numbers, when we came back in July, we had 34 tickets that month. That number steadily rose. It peaked in February. We had 279 tickets issued. March was around 250. And this month we're almost at 200. So I anticipate the volume of tickets to being around 250. I think we'll see an influx come, when the weather changes. We're getting a lot of trash and debris tickets right now. I anticipate soon we'll see overgrowth tickets. So it's a really nice forum for inspectors to be able to issue those citations. And then if there's not compliance, just quickly refer those to the BAA. And, kudos to Jake and his team. There's really a pretty quick turnaround, for those types of violations, and as well as all the violations that if they're, it reaches the point of non-compliance and they can't get contact with the property owner, there's no backlog anymore. So those inspectors refer the case to the BAA. Jake's team compiles a ticket. The ticket is sent to us. We confirm service, and then we get it out the door. So that could happen within the matter of a couple of days. So and that, all of that, his inspectors getting those cases referred, his team doing the work on the front end, compiling them, and then my team doing the work to get them served. That's really all attributed to that increase in ticket volume. The increase in ticket volume means an increase in everything else. So a huge increase in the number of hearings as well. You can see And just to give you numbers for the tickets. So last year we reported 405 tickets issued. My estimate was a little over 1,200. We're already at over 1,400 tickets for this year. And that number will keep going up as we close out this fiscal year. For the number of hearings based on complaints, we reported 28 last year. I had estimated 91 for this year. We're already at 191. So we've well surpassed that. And just to give you an idea, you can see the second line in that activity indicator is number of tickets. So that 191 hearings that we've held encompass the adjudication of 505 tickets. So about a third of the tickets that were issued, the property owners requested hearings on, and we've either held hearings or we have them scheduled. You all should be receiving all the counselors should be receiving a weekly BAA hearing calendar now that outlines the upcoming hearings that we have scheduled for the next month or two, as well as the outcomes from that previous month. So I hope that that's beneficial, giving you an overview of the cases we're adjudicating and those types of outcomes. The nature of that calendar is we do have a lot of adjournments, which I know has been a point of concern with the local housing courts. And our ordinance specifically states that we can allow up to 2 for good cause due to all of our hearings being virtual. And we deal with a lot of LLCs that need to submit proper documentation in order for an actual person to appear on behalf of the LLC. I'm pretty generous with granting the adjournments, at least one for the LLC documents, and then based on the property owners need to reschedule and sometimes the inspectors need to reschedule, we may have 1 or 2 adjournments for those. I know yesterday during Jake's meeting, Councilor Hogan brought up, what are the numbers for the fines assessed and the penalties assessed versus, the revenue that's coming in. And I'm happy to report that all of those numbers, are just going up quite a bit. And I can give you a brief overview of those. So for tickets issued, to give you an idea of just the impact of that increase in ticketing, when we met for the committee meeting in February, I reported that the fines from the tickets issued was about 82,000. Through today, the fines for ticket, and that was at that point we were at 725 tickets. Now with just over 1,400 tickets, the fines that have been issued is over 182,000. So that's $100,000 increase just by doubling the amount of fines. So I really am happy with the progress we're making on that end. As far as defaults, similar to what I told you back in February, about half of the cases default. So when we talked in February, there was about 350 defaults issued. So every time a case defaults, and just to give you a brief recap, when we issue that ticket with the associated fine, the property owner has 30 days to enter a plea. They could plead guilty and pay, and we'll talk about payments in a moment, or they could request a hearing, or if they do nothing after those 30 days, they default. We issue a default decision and order in which a penalty that is the same amount as the fine is added. So about half the cases default. So we issue about half default decision and order. So when I reported to you in February, it was around 350, bringing the amount of penalties issued to just over $40,000. Now we're at over 780 defaults issued for the year, and we're just under $100,000. So again, that's what's being issued, and similarly, our revenue is keeping up and increasing. So again,
Leah, can
yeah.
I interrupt you for just a quick question?
Ahead.
What happens in those situations? So we're assuming the defaults, those people haven't shown up, they're not there. So we're assuming these are probably our delinquent landlords, those that aren't paying attention, that don't care. What happens after that with that, with that 100,000 that's been assigned? I know we're early days, but what does collection effort look like after those are issued?
Sure. So when we issue a default decision and order, the property owner has 30 days for what's called to request a stay. So the stay is to avoid a judgment being filed. Technically, under the ordinance, they can basically request a stay at any point. There's a different threshold up to a year, even if we filed, or beyond that. But so we wait that 30 days, and we get a lot of hearing requests after the point of default. And then at the hearing, we'll address the reason for default as well as the underlying violation. If after that 30 days they have not entered payment or requested a hearing, then the next step would be to file a judgment and lien against the property, which I know also came up in Jake's hearing yesterday. Kristen and I have been working diligently with the local courts to iron out that process. Once it's ironed, we will file with city court and then transcript over to the county clerk, so it's placed as a lien on the property. I started doing it initially a different mechanism. We reevaluated internally and with the courts. I have not been filing at this point because what I'm asking the local courts to do is to waive a $45 index fee that we would have to pay for each case. As you're all aware, the violations start at $50. So for a first ticket for failure to apply for rental registry, a default would be $100. In addition to that $45, we also have to pay a $6 transcript fee for each filing. I'm not contesting that we should have to pay the $6, so I'm asking the courts to waive the $45. I haven't started filing at that $51 mark because I didn't want to implement that we're able to pay this and willing to do so. I really want the court to waive that, and we've supported our argument for why we should do that. We started with the chief administrative judge of city court. It got escalated to the chief judge of the 5th Judicial District, and now he has escalated it to the chief administrative judge for the entire state. So I was really pushing locally to have a decision before this budget because there is a big additional expense in the budget for the filing, which would be, you can see under the payments to other governments, $76,500. That is calculated as if we're paying the $51 per case at 1,500 judgments filed. But because it got escalated on a state level, they said that there's no way I would have an answer before this hearing today. It's been almost a month, so I plan, to follow up and keep on top of them. I'm optimistic that we're close to a resolution, whether they say, okay, Leah, we agree and we'll waive that $45, or if they say, no, sorry, we're not going to waive it. There's not much locally in housing. Some of the filings that Kristen and her teams do, there is a local court decision that allows them to waive certain filing fees in county court. There's nothing similar in city court, but we're making the argument that because our cases have already been adjudicated, we're hoping that they agree with us. But if they don't, we'll move forward with the filing with the $51. It'll just be a cost benefit analysis. I probably won't be filing judgments on those cases where the judgment would only be for $100. So I would set some internal threshold of what to file. And once we're able to do that, we'll have a large backlog. And I think that that'll really help. We see an increase in, compliance and payment at kind of every step of our process. So when somebody gets ticketed, we see an increase in compliance and payment for the tickets. When somebody gets that default decision and order, we see, an increase in additional group pay or comply at that point. So I think by adding the filing of a judgment and lien, that will add an increase as well. I know we've also talked about rolling it onto the taxes under the enabling state legislation, and I've previously advised that unfortunately that's not a very workable option. Again, the housing team has spent a lot of time drilling down and finding what existing properties we could roll on starting this year for the annual tax levy. And we have a couple that we're going to do that for, but those properties are either already eligible to be seized, already vacant. They're just not high priorities and they don't really give the teeth that we're looking for. So I'm hoping that that judgment process does that once we get to that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I gave you the overviews for the tickets, the fines issued, the penalties issued. As far as revenue goes, when we were here in February, the revenue is actually underperforming, and I reported just over $8,000. You know, as I stated then, I think it was a product of, you know, the delay due to COVID and the, you know, startup of ticketing was kind of a slow trickle, and then we really moved forward. During that time, we also started accepting online payments through Invoice Cloud. We started those in January, and those have really picked up as well. And we're just around almost $38,000 in revenue now. So obviously still have a long way to go, but I think that that's encouraging, you know, especially compared to last year, you know, total collected fines, penalties, and judgments. The last line on my activity indicators, it was just over 19,000. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and I'm really excited, you know, about where all of these numbers are going. And again, once we start filing judgments, I think that that number will go up even further. And I'm really optimistic that, you know, one way or another, that we'll start that very soon in the next couple of months. So that's kind of an overview, you know, of my basic numbers. I'm happy to drill down into other lines of the budget or answer other specific questions counselors have, but I'll open it up at this point for, you know, questions or comments.
Questions from counselors?
Yeah, Leah, I was a bit confused by if we look at page 132,
Yep.
The projected at 97. It just seems. What's the difference between the projected and adopted in 21? Was that? Yeah, the projection's 97. The adopted.
Sure.
Yeah.
So for the salary line, I had a paralegal position that was vacant for a couple of months, in addition to the increased vacancy rate and due to the COVID contingency. But that's the only difference. And with only 2 employees, you know, I've been here the whole time, but you know, that position sat for a little bit. It's been filled. The paralegal I hired is actually transitioning out, but I already have approval to start somebody within a couple of days. And then, you know, I've got a great stack of candidates, assuming that this budget gets approved, to bring on another paralegal. So I'm hoping that there's not much of a lag. So the big jump for this year would again include that additional paralegal in my increase. And then for the temporary services line, the dip down is because we cut that $30,000 for the part-time administrative law judge, which again, I'm asking just to reinstate that position at the same amount. You know, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not confident that's going to be enough, but it'll be at least a little bit of help. And then, you know, I'll be able to evaluate what else is needed going forward. You know, I think, as I've expressed since I started the Bureau, that it's kind of hard to gauge because we haven't hit like a plateau. We've kind of been up and down, and then, you know, since July, we've been steadily ramping up in tickets. And then, you know, now as we're hitting springtime, there's a whole different set of, you know, violations that the inspectors can cite. So, you know, I'm pretty confident that soon we'll know what we're at, and it's at a steady pace. You know, we discussed in February as well that there's still, you know, a pretty significant gap between the number of violations that are being referred either to the BAA or law department, but I think we're closing that gap. And at some point when we hit that threshold, then I'll be able to say, all right, this is what fully staffed for the BAA to, you know, handle that load looks like. But for now, it's kind of trial and error.
Great.
And then I can just, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to jump onto something else. So
I was just going to ask, my other question was, in contractual and other expenses on 132, the jump in fiscal year 22, payments to other governments projected 76,500. You know,
sure, that would be the
about?
cost. That's the cost for the filing of the judgments and liens. if it's at that $51. So again, I'm hoping that instead of $51,
Okay.
it's only $6, but because I don't have that determination from the state at this point, I budgeted it as if it was $51. And that's for, I think I did it for 1,500 filing. Again, we have probably, you know, around 400, 500 that are, you know, kind of in the hopper, ready to be filed, that are sitting there. And then, you know, again, 50% default. So after the 30 days, we would automatically file all those as well. So I'm hoping that that number gets significantly lowered, but if not, I'm prepared to move forward.
Gotcha. Didn't connect those two. Got it. Thank
Yep,
you.
no problem. Yeah, and then there's also a jump in the office supplies. That's in part due to the increase in the volume of tickets. Again, you know, that it's largely our printer expenses and paper expenses. So every, you know, from 36 tickets in July to, you know, around 250 a month now is a lot of additional tickets. And then, you know, that means additional work for everything else. And then that also encompasses an increase for the parking budget. You know, the idea right now is for the BAA to move over into that parking violation space. So we would take our Toshiba all-in-one copier printer over there, and rather than, you know, splitting it out into two budget lines, we would just keep the same contract with Toshiba that we have. But it, you know, we would absorb all of the printing for that.
All good. Was there something else you were about to go on to, Leah?
No,
Any
I was
Counselor
just going to
Green's,
explain that jump that I just did. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Counselor Green might be frozen, but
Yeah, he lost his connection. If anybody else
he
has
lost
questions.
I should say lost his connection, not actually frozen. But Leah, so as I understand this, your proposed $35,000 in revenue, but the total amount of assessed fines by then would be about $145,000, and there's like a significant lag time rather between the judgments being, you know, the judgments being issued and the money coming in, correct?
Well, right now we're not issuing any judgments. So people, the payments come in at varying times. Some people pay right when they get the tickets. Some people pay, you know, after a hearing, depending on what type of determination is issued at the hearing. Some people pay after they get that default decision in order, so they're paying the fine and penalty at that time. And then, you know, once we start filing judgments, I anticipate, you know, payment, an additional round of payments being received at that point. So
Okay.
right now, I mean, we'll accept the payment whenever they want to pay. If they don't pay within those first 30 days, then a penalty is added and they now owe double what the initial fine was.
So it ratchets up, and I know I've talked to Jake and you before, and certainly Lee, you've come a long way. We've come a long way from that meeting in Washington Square about a year and a half ago. It's really amazing, you know, and we so need you because of the appalling inefficiency of the housing court. But so I'm really happy with this. But at the end, the lien is for the particularly the landlords, the chronic problem landlords. The lien is the end. That's the most of a penalty you can. That's the severest penalty you can issue, right?
That's
As
correct.
administrative, right? And that would only come into play, obviously, when they wanted to get rid of the property.
Yep, if they wanted to get rid of the property, if, you know, I mean, we just had a case where we actually did have one lien from when we were filing, and as well as some defaults, and they sold the property without paying them, right? You can sell your property to me and I could take it subject to those judgments and liens. Well, not to the judgments, but to the liens. So it's entirely up to the property owners, but that would be kind of the highest level of enforcement that we have. And in addition, for any case, you know, once we're done adjudicating it and we send the case back to Jake and his team, we have a lot of cases where his inspectors will re-refer it. So they'll issue a subsequent ticket. And for the first 3 tickets, those tickets, the fine amounts go up. So we have cases that have been issued, 6, 7 times, and you would think that's frivolous, but for some of them, that fifth time, the property owner finally, files the rental registry and pays. So why they didn't do it, I don't know. So there's really no set pattern that we see. Each property owner is very different.
Okay, and you did say earlier that there is, in your judgment, and of course Kristen's judgment, is that putting the fines on the taxes won't help us out at all, because it seems to me the chronic landlords that own property, the ones that always are problems, the idea of them owning property, it'd be great if we could like seize that property down the road and throw,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, that would be the final thing. So
Yeah,
But if
again,
you-
that the state legislation has very specific criteria, one of which
It's
is
a
that the
percentage, right?
violations, I'm sorry?
it's a percentage, right?
It's a percentage of the tax assessed value. The violations have to still be open. So if they fix the violations, it's
Yeah,
no
okay.
longer eligible. They have to still own the property. And then, again, based on the time and effort that Kristen's team spent, most of the properties that they came up with were already eligible to be seized. So it's definitely still an option. And I think on some level, there'll be an evaluation annually to see if any properties pop. But, through this first round of reviews, which didn't include any of mine, again, because we haven't got to the point of filing those judgments. But you have to remember also that even if they're placed this year, they're not going to be eligible to be seized for several additional years. They have to go through that whole process.
Okay. Well, keep up the fight. You and Jake do a great job with the help of Kristen. I mean, this is, I think this is what former Councilor Nicoletti sort of dreamed of when he put this legislation forward, and this up and running. And you're really a key help, tremendous help to the neighborhood's stability and integrity. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Councilor Hogan, can I ask a question?
I'm not actually in charge of this, but of course I'll assume the mantle
Yes.
of leadership.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes,
So,
yes,
Leah-
of course, John.
Okay, Leah, have you thought about a legislative solution if you don't win your non-payment in court, where we ask the state legislature to exempt local charges for intergovernmental filings? I mean, have we thought about legislation if we don't get a positive answer?
I have not thought about legislation. Honestly, I was just then going to pay. I mean, it would be, if they say we're not going to waive that index fee, then we need the index number for the purpose of filing. So I would pay for that. Again, there's not much precedent across the state because there's not many cities with BAAs right now. There are more and more cities getting them up and running. I mean, over the past couple of months, I've probably talked to 4 or 5 cities or municipalities as small as DeWitt to, as large as Huntington. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this is evaluated. But it's definitely something we could consider. I just, I'm honestly not sure of the intersection between legislation and the local courts. I don't know what the authority would be for that, but it's something that we could explore.
Okay, I do think the state legislature does have authority over the local courts, but yeah, I think we should look into it if you're not successful.
Yes,
Well,
and I
liens
would
are
just point out, in the meantime, I probably would start paying and filing again. I know that's been a big concern of a lot of the counselors and myself, and I don't want the backlog to keep growing. So at some point, once we have a determination, I plan to file either at the $51 or the $6, and then we could absolutely continue to explore other options.
What about LLCs, Leah? I mean, how do we handle them? I mean,
Yep.
the
So-
same way, obviously, right?
Yep, they're all, it doesn't matter if it's an LLC, if it's you personally own it, if it's owner occupied property or rental, they're all handled the same. Obviously, the only difference would be when a hearing is requested for an LLC, we require them to submit an affidavit with supporting documentation of the LLC. Usually that's, tax documentation or articles of incorporation or organization showing that the person who is requesting the hearing and appearing has the authority to do so.
Okay.
But we have a lot of LLCs that get ticketed on multiple properties. So we just, keep track of those. Kristen's talked about our swarm efforts. Jake mentioned Skyline yesterday, so that we know, all right, this owner has been ticketed on 10 different properties. Maybe now, it's time to make sure that the law department and Jake's team are aware of that, so that they can bundle those and explore filing in city or state, well, for that case, state Supreme Court. Similar, last week I had, and next week I have, hearings with probably 10 different cases with one LLC. So we'll bundle them together, bang all of them out at one time, and then give them an opportunity to comply. And I think last week actually, was with a popular landlord, and most of the violations were corrected. So that was really encouraging.
And maybe this is to Kristen too, but I mean, particular landlords that have a history of not only violations, multiple violations, but in my opinion, imperiling public safety. Is there any kind of, I know you're looking into it, Kristen, any kind of criminal penalty with any of them? I mean, I can think of one particular one who is very active in my council district. And, I just think that some of these folks, liens or anything like that, they're never going to change their behavior, unfortunately. So anything you guys might think of, to John's point, about any kind of legislation we can put before the council that would really have a severe penalty against some of these folks, I would be in favor of. So
yeah, we talked about, so I'm sorry to talk over you. We have talked about this before, and I have asked our team to look at it. It's on the list of items that they're researching. And then we'd have to pick the right case of where we pursue this. And it's good. It's no small deal to bring criminal charges. So we just want to make sure that we're doing it right and we're picking the right case.
I mean, actually, even if we lost in court, it would send a message. It would certainly send a message. And certainly the creation of the BAA and the way it's being carried out is sending a message too. So, and the aggressiveness of our law department, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Are you going to run this rest of this meeting, Mr. Driscoll? Councilor Driscoll? You got to unmute yourself.
You're muted.
It's the first time I've been able to say that to anybody.
Councilor Green is back.
He's back.
I lost
Is he
him
back?
there,
Councilor
so
Green back? Okay, good.
I wouldn't miss this for anything, Councilor.
Updated his internet.
I'm glad you're back, Councilor Green. You're unfrozen.
He had to dial back in,
Councilor Green,
up
can
the
I ask
phone.
a question?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Kristen, just maybe you have already talked about this, but has there been any thought put around noise ordinance being moved away from the court to BAA?
I've not really. I've heard a little rumbling of that just over the past week or so, and I imagine it's related to the meeting convened by Judge Murphy regarding community court. For those of you who aren't up to speed on that, Judge Murphy, as he was getting his courts restarted, was taking a look at community court, which is where quality of life ordinance tickets are heard, and convened a group of city employees and leaders, as well as some community advocates or stakeholders, to talk about how we can make community court more effective. So I think there's some good efforts going on there. One of the issues right now is that a whole lot of people who get those tickets don't show up to court. And so I would be concerned that if they're not showing up to court, they may be even less likely to show up to an administrative proceeding run by the city. Although I don't, sort of reasonable minds could think about that issue in two different ways. But no, I haven't really explored that. I'm excited about the efforts that Judge Murphy is initiating. He actually just scheduled a follow-up meeting with everyone to discuss it further. And in that first meeting, there was a lot of energy around the idea of assuming we can get people to appear for their tickets, exploring more community service sentences rather than fines.
What, so I'm asking that, Kristen, because, and first of all, I didn't talk to anybody. It's coming from somebody that is tired of each ticket being issued and going nowhere. And as you know, that affect the quality of life for so many people. And I, as a district counselor, I'm constantly receiving those calls and having those conversations where people are just making life around neighborhood miserable, and they get fined, they get asked to go to court and avail to nothing. I'm one of those people who would have loved to sit in front of Judge Murphy and ask him what's going on. You got to do something, and as a city, Kristen, I'm wondering if that get moved to BAA, can we give that some teeth in terms of, doing like what's being done with housing? People get tickets, they don't show up. Something got to happen. Something got to happen. I don't know what it is, but something got to happen to create some kind of accountability, because it's not fair for people who pay their taxes and they just cannot be comfortable around their homes. These people got to be held accountable. So that is what I'm trying to figure out. What is that accountability look like? Judge Murphy, I don't know how much he's doing, but I don't know what's going on. And all I know is neighbors are constantly calling us saying that, Joel, something got to be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple things. One is we can look at that. I think it would need some change in legislation, certainly locally, maybe on the state level in terms of the jurisdiction of the BAA. And I will follow up with you after this meeting to see if we can get you involved in those efforts with Judge Murphy after this meeting. And you can express those concerns directly.
I would love to express my opinions too to Judge Murphy, if I could, Kristen, if he would countenance me. Sure. I mean, the issue, of course, is bench warrants being issued, and the BAA can't issue bench warrants. So, and the
they can't
city
issue
court
warrants.
can.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, in terms of the sort of the back end enforcement, I mean, the court certainly has more power than the BAA, and the difference between a personal violation versus a property violation. We can put the property violation, we can place a lien on the property. You can't really do that with a ticket for, say, a noise violation. So there's some fundamental differences between those kinds of tickets versus property violation tickets. Not to say we shouldn't be looking at every option on the table, because we should.
And what I'm trying to push here, Kristen, is to treat those tickets like the property violation tickets, because they are technically,
Oh, noise, noise maybe.
Yeah.
You're right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So yes, I'd be happy to talk with you offline and just to figure out what can we do here, because this has been too long and it's unacceptable,
Other questions from councilors? If not, then we'll close this budget hearing, and I believe our next one's at 11 o'clock. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.